We all know the pain of walking down a busy street at night with your missus deciding where to eat. You walk past a few restaurants which seem nice with a few empty seats out the front, but the voice of indecision tells you to keep walking just around the corner, because maybe there'll be a better restaurant a few steps away. So you walk around the corner, but then you realise it's a dead end. So you decide to return to the first restaurant you saw, but now all of the seats are fully taken. And your indecision has got you nowhere but tired legs and an angry girlfriend. We face micro decisions like these every day. But sometimes we face decisions which are much more urgent. Should I marry this person? Should I take this job? Should I trust him? Should I quit everything and travel to Colombia to give that girl I clearly fancy some flowers and see if we can't get married in 3 months? Anyway, fortune favours the decisive, and being able to make decisions will prove invaluable for your general well-being and success in life. But how can we make sure we always make the right decision? How can we become decision-making masters? Well, I'm glad you asked. No one asked. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to share the key insights I learned from forensic psychologist Lauren Allison's book, Decision Time, which has literally revolutionized the way I make all decisions in my life for the better. We'll cover the 2 main barriers to good decision making, how to understand your individual psychology to work with yourself, and we'll utilize the STAR method, which is used by top policemen, military, and decision makers all over the world. The first barrier to good decision making is possibly the most cognitively demanding thing of all, and the author coins it redundant deliberation. This is where you obsessively think about a decision without acting upon the information you have. You fall prey to the cognitive bias of convincing yourself that more information is what you need, when really you have enough information. Allison says it takes self-awareness to recognize this loop, and you just need to act when you have enough information, which we'll get into later. Deliberating without arriving at a solution is simply running as fast as you can to stay in the same place. To give you a quick insight, when you reach 51% certainty, make the decision. The second barrier to good decision making is implementation failure, otherwise known as making a decision but not following through on the plan. And this is where stress is highest, in the gap between deciding and acting. Imagine a parachute jumper. Their stress is highest when they've committed to jumping, but there's still time for them to back out while they're ascending into the sky. For a decision to be meaningful, it must be acted upon. If you're at risk of implementation failure, then you'll need to map out with precision the actual actions you need to take in order to follow through on the plan. But the key step to overcoming these 2 decision barriers is knowing your psychology. One study showed the effect sleep deprivation can have on decision making. Sleep-deprived soldiers were ordered to fire blanks at moving targets. Blank is a fake bullet, basically. But little did they know the targets were actual humans. 60% of the soldiers continued shooting, but only 40% of the soldiers stopped shooting after one soldier realized that the targets were moving people. Understand, the worse your health while you're making a decision, the worse your decision outcome will be. To briefly conceptualize this, think about it in terms of acute and chronic strain. Acute strain is felt in the moment after an event occurs, like the adrenaline rush of fight or flight. In this case, you'll need to breathe, go for a walk, calm your physiology down, physiological sigh, and then revisit the situation. Our law system is set up to accommodate for this. That's why we have first-degree murder and heat-of-the-moment murder. Chronic strain, however, refers to problems which are a little bit more deeper, like a disease, bad lifestyle, or addictions. So if you have time, optimize your health before you make any big decision. In decision making, there are 2 types of people, maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers want their decision to be perfect, satisficers want their decision to be good enough. Psychology shows that maximizers are less happy, have less self-esteem, and they're more likely to suffer from regret and procrastination because their expectations are just too unrealistic. So to get a hold on which one you are, ask yourself, how often do you read the whole menu in a restaurant? How often do you imagine a perfect future? How often do you surf for ages before picking something to watch on Netflix? Quick side note, maximizing isn't always a bad thing, you just need to understand when you have the opportunity and time to do so. Values are key to guiding our decision making. As you know, we're heavy on values in this community, but in the book he gave an example from a soldier who, after a 24-hour firefight with the Taliban, was ordered by his general to go out into the mountains and do a body count so he could report it back to HQ. But Reflecting on his value of protecting his team, he refused to do so, despite his higher officer berating him and aggressively shouting at him in his face. To make any decision, you must first know and rank your values in order of importance. You need something higher than you in the moment of deciding in order to decide with clarity. To understand your values, check out this short 6-minute video here. It will explain everything you need to know. Oh no, he recommended me a video. Yeah, I'm sorry to be that guy, but I could explain it here, but it would eat up more of your time. So now we've covered the two main barriers to decision making and the importance of self-awareness. Let's finish off by covering the STAR method so we can become decision making masters. We love stories. I love a story, and we use stories to make sense of the uncertainty in the world around us. Uncertainty over which decision to make, how to follow through, or whether the decision will turn out to be fruitful or not. In the book, Allison argues that when we encounter a situation, our mind is like a pint glass full of water. If, while it's full, we try to add more information to an already full glass, it's just going to spill over and cause more stress to us. So after something happens, we must empty the glass in order to get distance from the situation and then to refill it with better information. Emptying our cup first also allows us to combat the primacy effect, which is where we prioritize information that we get first. So when life gets too complex, simplify plus cast away. In the context of stories and decision making, we can utilize a principle called grim storytelling to combat the uncertainty we feel around decision making. First of all, the key to becoming a master decision maker is to ask one question before you do anything else. Ask, how much time do I have to make this decision? Then, if you have time, you must think through all of the possible worst case and best case scenarios that could happen after you make this decision. And then when it comes to deciding, don't fall for the trap of picking the best option. Instead, Allison argues we should focus on picking the least worst option because the best option is often unrealistic. Lastly, whenever something happens to us which forces us to make a decision, we must distance ourselves and gather the story by asking, what has happened? Why has it happened? What are no more than 3 plausible outcomes of what is going to happen next? Then you need to consider, do I have to decide now? If I don't, how much time do I have to firm up which of these scenarios is most likely? But decision making won't mean nothing if we don't become masters of timing. Therefore, this is the next thing we're going to cover. I would go into the neuroscience of what I'm about to explain, but in order to spare you of the nerdy details, over the last few millennia, our brain has evolved in a way where it prioritizes information over current events rather than future events. We are biased to prioritize the present, which for decision making isn't always the best thing. We all have different concepts of time. Some of us are more future focused, whereas some of us are more present focused. To get an understanding of this, grab a stopwatch or your phone, because stopwatches are like from the 1800s, and click it and then put it to the side and then stop the stopwatch when you think a minute has passed. Oh, 56 seconds. What did you score? To become a time master, you can use foxtrot thinking. After first understanding how much time you have to make the decision, then engage the framework of slow, fast. Engage slow thinking to ponder how much time you have, distance yourself from the situation and to reconnect with your sacred values, and then engage fast action to make the decision after enough information has been gathered. To put this into a thought experiment, think back to decisions you've made in the past, whether good or bad. Now think about how differently that decision outcome would have been if you'd have taken more or less time to make the decision. When considering the time you have when making a decision, ask, do I have time to gather information? Will gathering information help me make a decision? Is there any more information I need to gather? Is it possible to gather that information within a reasonable amount of time? Is the information I'm gathering actually helpful? Remember, you must think about the least worst option before the worst option appears without your control. But we can never be 100% sure we'll make the right decision. And sometimes after we've made the decision and committed to it, unforeseen circumstances will pop up, making us enact flexibility and adaptability to our decision. Hence, being able to adapt is crucial to good decision making. In the 1990s, an American social psychologist called Eri Gruglansky coined the term need for closure and explained how individually we either have low, medium or high need for closure. Need for closure describes an individual's tendency to want to complete their goals, have structure and be decisive. For example, someone who has high need for closure organising a party for people with low need for closure would be a disaster because they would likely be absolutely shocked when they've arranged everyone to arrive at their house for 8 p.m. and then everyone turns up an hour later at 9. People with high NFC have a high need for order, predictability, avoidance of ambiguity, and are more closed-minded and engage in more black and white thinking. If you are a person who has high need for closure, then you can use these tools to combat it in order to make better decisions. Seek the opposite. Think of the reasons you should or shouldn't make the decision you've decided. Treat all information as if it matters at first. Don't fall for the primacy effect. If it's not black and white, it's not black and white. Search for the grey areas and trade-offs. Accept the complexity of choice. For example, X has happened before and resulted in Y, but what if this time it results in Z? Take advice from other people. And lastly, interrogate your information. Do you have the full picture? Is some information inconsistent or contradictory? Have you tested what you assume to be true? Lastly, all of the information we've covered so far means nothing if we don't know how to remain resilient after we've made the decision and committed to it. And we also need to know how to revise our decision if, after making it, we realise it wasn't the best decision after all. Imagine you're a train operator in a CCTV room. There's a train heading north and it's approaching a junction where you'll have to direct whether it takes track 1 or track 2. But on track 1, there are 2 children playing. On track 2, there's 1 child playing. You know where we're going with this. You have to direct the train. So what do? Do you divert the train towards the 2 children or the 1? Take a moment to think. I don't know what I'd do. The likelihood is you'd do nothing. Why? Because as human beings, we prefer inaction to proactive action. We feel more proactively involved in something when we initiate action as opposed to when we just sit back. So in this scenario, your brain would trick you into believing that if you do nothing, you can avoid the responsibility and therefore avoid the feeling of guilt and despair after making a decision. But doing nothing is still doing something. Besides, this ploy our brain would play on us is just avoidance of loss aversion, a cognitive bias where we're more motivated to avoid losing things than we are to gain something. But the part of your brain which mediates loss aversion is the same part which mediates emotions such as disgust and guilt. So even if inaction provides you with short-term escape, you can be sure that there's a whole load of guilt waiting for you in the future. Procrastination in your choosing equals circumstance will make the choice for you. Before we cover how to become resilient in the face of decision making, there's one more cognitive bias we need to cover: status quo bias. This is when we take the same actions we've always done rather than doing something else. Ask yourself, are you doing something for the sake of not doing something else? Or are you doing that thing because it genuinely brings positive benefits in your life? Understand, status quo bias isn't always bad. For example, taking the same walking path you do every single day can free up mental energy for you to focus on other things while you're walking. Taken to its extreme, it will plague your life and decision making with rigidity and stubbornness, so be careful. Finally, when you've made your decision, you'll need to revisit it and revise it every now and then to see if it's still serving you. To do this, ask these 2 questions. What is your reason for persisting? Or reason to no longer persist? Is the goal you're currently striving for one that is truly important to you? You need to value your investment, but not be so tied to it that you blindly stay invested in it. On the other hand, as mentioned, you'll need to develop the qualities of grit and resilience in order to stay steadfast and headstrong after you've made a decision which is right for you. Grit is defined as passion and sustained persistence applied towards long-term achievement with no particular concern for rewards or recognition along the way. I like that. Allison defines resilience as the ability for an organism to remain centered during disequilibrium. And he argues there are four pillars to resilience that we can rely on after a decision is made: physical health, purpose, fun and joy, and feedback from others. So, in summary, because that was a lot of information, beware of redundant deliberation and implementation failure. Know your psychology. What do you value? How is your health? Are you a maximizer or a satisficer? Distance yourself from the situation to refill your cup if you have time to do so. Ask, most importantly, how much time do you have to make this decision before anything else? Seek opposing information to the information you currently have. Once you've made the right decision, remain resilient and gritty by focusing on your physical health, purpose, fun and joy, and your feedback from others. To make this an even more complete guide to decision making, here are some principles and mental models I rely on whenever I make a decision, whether it be big or small. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. Consider fully and act decisively. Oftentimes our best course of action appears objectionable at first step. In fact, it always does. The best way to make the worst decision is to ask everyone's opinion. When something is for you, it will bring clarity and alignment, not chaos and confusion. If it costs your mental health, then it's too expensive. Sometimes it's best to lie low, to do nothing but let the winter pass. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Don't confuse what you want with what you need. You should be absolutely willing to make a less exciting decision if it's within your long-term best interests. Never take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with, and never take direction from someone who's never been where you're going. And remember, a problem postponed is a problem extended. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your time and attention. Stay disciplined, playful, and dangerous. Salut!